Good morning, squirrels. All right, first video we're doing from home. Hopefully most of you watch this so that you get something out of it, because we are still trying to keep up with education, because right now PSSAs are not canceled. And yes, I'm home. Yes, I'm in my craft room. Yes, it's a lot of yarn behind me. Try not to be distracted by the giant yarn behind me or my children, who will scream literally at any moment now that I'm recording. It's just going to happen. Just like any other day at school, though, so pretty normal, right? We are going to be looking at Elizabeth Jennings' fight today. It is in your Sequoia syllabary packet. It looks like this. It's the second passage. There you go. And we are also going to be filling in the graphic organizer that goes with it. It says Black Line Master 48 at the top. Looks like this, just like the other context clues chart that we did previously. Okay, they've given us some words, one of which I don't necessarily agree with, but we're going to add to it just like we did the last packet that we did. So follow along with me. We're going to start by reading the passage just like we always do, just so we can get an idea of what it means. Then we're going to go back and look for the words that we didn't understand, and we're going to start looking for context in our chart. Remember, context is within the text. So you have to go back and read what's the sentence that the word is in, and then sentences around that sentence to get full understanding. Okay? So, Elizabeth Jennings' fight. Many of us know the inspiring story of Rosa Parks, the African-American woman who challenged segregation by refusing to sit in the back of a bus in 1955. But what many people do not know is that an equally courageous event took place 101 years earlier. In the mid-1800s, the buses in New York City were large railroad cars pulled along tracks by horses. It was like the combination of a carriage and a train. Whether or not black people were allowed to ride was up to the conductor, and most of the time, they were not. The conductors carried whips and punished people who tried to ride the bus without their permission. There were few buses for black people, and they were irregular and hard to find. In 1854, about 7 years before the start of the Civil War, Elizabeth Jennings tried to board a bus and go to church. The conductor refused. He said the train car was full. After Jennings pointed out that it was not, he informed her that she would make the white passengers uncomfortable. She refused to leave, grabbing his coat and a window frame as he tried to remove her. The conductor threw her off, destroyed her bonnet, ruined her dress, and hurt her. Yet she still stood strong. She had to be held back by a policeman before the bus could pull away. A crowd had gathered to watch the abuse, and word of the event spread. Jennings's church held a large meeting the next day. People in the community were outraged. Jennings hired a young lawyer, Chester Arthur, to fight the transit company. In 1855, a judge ruled against the company and awarded Jennings $250. The trial was a turning point. The ruling helped further the fight against segregation, and New York City transportation was totally desegregated by 1860. In 1881, the young lawyer who won the trial became president of the United States. Pretty good story, one that honestly I wasn't even familiar with before reading this passage, so it's pretty cool to know that we always talk about Rosa Parks being the first one to really fight against segregation in transit authorities, but it was Elizabeth Jennings who did it first, and over 100 years before she did. It's pretty cool. So we're going to start with our first word in our organizer, which is segregation. So let's read back through paragraph 1 to underline that word and then look for that context that's around it. Okay? Many of us know the inspiring story of Rosa Parks, the African-American woman who challenged segregation by refusing to sit in the back of a bus in 1955. So I'm going to stop right there. I've got my sentence and I've got my word and I can underline it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Do the same. Now, what in this sentence is going to help me understand what segregation means? This is a word some of us are already really familiar with, and some of us aren't. We hear the word, but we don't necessarily know what the word means. We know it has something to do with race, and we know that people fought against it, but what does it really mean? What do I know about Rosa Parks? I know she's an African-American woman, so I'm going to circle that as part of my context, and I'm going to write that when I have the clues from text box. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to talk about how Rosa Parks an African American woman. There go the screaming children that I warned you about. Okay. And then it talks about how she refused to sit in the back of the bus. So I'm going to underline refusing to sit in the back of a bus and put that in my organizer. Now, if they're trying to put her in the back of the bus, who's in the front of the bus? They make it a point to tell me that she's an African American woman. So I'm guessing people who aren't African American are sitting in the front. That would mean people who are white. So from the fact that Rosa Parks is an African American and she's being forced to move to where white people are, to where white people are not, segregation should mean the separation of people based on race, because they made it a point to point out that she was African American. So I'm going to write that down for my meaning. Separation of people based on race. All right, then. Now we're going to go down to the next word on our organizer, which confuses me why they put this even on here, because it's pretty self-explanatory and we've discussed it in prior units, but the word is Civil War. So we're going to go along with it and assume that we don't know what a Civil War is, even though most of us should if we paid attention in, Unit 1 or Unit 5 or Unit 8 that we just finished. Just going to throw that out there. Okay, we're going to go down to paragraph 3. We're going to reread paragraph 3 to find this. In 1854, about 7 years before the start of the Civil War, Elizabeth Jennings tried to board a bus and go to church. Boom. So we're going to underline Civil War in our passage. Now, it gives me a date, 1854, and it says that that's 7 years before the start of the Civil War. So I'm going to do some real quick math. 1861 is what I get. So clues from the text, 1854, about 7 years before. That tells me that the Civil War is a war, obviously, that starts in 1861. I'm going to write that under my meaning. War that starts in 1861. Okay. And we know that we're talking about New York City because it talked about that in paragraph 2. So where's New York City? New York State. Where's New York State? It's in America. So I'm going to say a war that starts in 1861 in America. That's really all the more the context gives us, which is why prior knowledge comes into play, because a civil war is a war that's fought within a country between peoples that live in that country. So when they talk about the Civil War, there are a lot of civil wars out there. But in this case, we're talking about the American Civil War, which begins in 1861. So then we come down to the word abuse. And we're going to go down to paragraph 4.
Can I help you with the video?
Not right this second, but you can help me later. Helpful children are helpful. You can watch from over there. You're going to come get in my video, aren't you?
No, I just want to
Prepare yourself for the small child in her pajamas. Small child in pajamas. Say hi.
Hey.
Mommy's trying to explain how to use context clues. Do you want to help me? All right. So we're going to read this paragraph, paragraph 4. Of course, you want to sit on my lap. This is why working from home as a teacher is fun and exciting. Hi. Your hair is a mess, by the way. You atrocious. That's my face. Okay. Paragraph 4. A crowd had gathered to watch the abuse. Underline that.
Mama, I found the goal with penguin pajamas, but the footies. Just like I have penguin pajamas.
You're really interrupting my reading right now. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
You're like the best first grader in the world doing that.
Hello.
Dude, I'm literally working.
With
Other
me.
child. No, I'm working. We're not gonna make dinosaurs in the background of the video. Thanks. Anyway, a crowd had gathered to watch the abuse. Underline that. And word of the event spread. So, is there much to go on there? Not particularly. We're going to underline abuse, of course. And in the
What?
Stop. I'm literally working.
With me.
Yes. And in the sentence, it says word of the event. So we're going to go ahead and circle the event. And then we're going to have to go back in our text to figure out what the event is. What does the abuse refer to? So let's go back to paragraph 3.
What?
Go away. And we're going to talk about the events that happened to Elizabeth Jennings. So in paragraph 3, it says the conductor threw her off, destroyed her bonnet, ruined her dress, and hurt her. That's the abuse that they're talking about in paragraph 4. So we're going to circle all of that, and we're going to write that down in our graphic organizer. Based on those actions, destroying her bonnet, ruining her dress, and hurting her, causing her harm. I swear she doesn't have coronavirus. She just has allergies. I promise. We're going to understand that the abuse means the violence against her, because the conductor really was, and you're pulling my sweater here, very violent towards Elizabeth Jennings and did cause her a lot of harm. So abuse is an action that causes someone harm. Okay? Now, what I'm going to challenge you to do, my squirrel friends, is to pick out at least 2 more words in this passage. Can I highly recommend you try irregular in paragraph 2? Or desegregated in paragraph 5, now that we know what segregation means. Fill in those additional words under your graphic organizer. Use your context clues to determine the meaning, and then write your own meaning down in your graphic organizer. And I will talk to you all again about this packet on Wednesday.